They say a woman's strength is forged in fire, but I didn't realize I was burning until there was nothing left of me except my child. My name is Maya. I wasn't born into poverty, but I was raised in the shadows of indifference. My father left when I was 6. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I learned early that the world wouldn't hand me a thing. But even with all I'd seen, nothing prepared me for what would happen after I fell in love with the wrong man. I was 19 when I met Dominic. He was charming, intense, and, at the time, I thought he was passionate. I mistook his possessiveness for love. By the time I realized the truth, I was already pregnant, isolated, and slowly disappearing. He didn't hit me at first. That came later, when his frustrations with work and money turned inward. The first time he apologized so profusely, I thought he meant it. The second time, he blamed me for pushing him. The third time, I learned to stop talking back. By the time my daughter Nova was born, I was a ghost in my own home. One night, during a storm that rattled the windows and matched the chaos inside me, he threw us out, just like that. No warning. Nova was barely 6 months old. I remember clutching her, wrapped in a threadbare baby blanket, standing barefoot on the cold pavement. My suitcase was torn at the zipper, my wallet was empty, and my pride had long since been crushed into dust. The streetlights flickered overhead. The rain didn't fall in droplets. It stabbed from the sky like needles. Nova whimpered against my chest, hungry and scared. I stood on the edge of an unfamiliar city with nothing but a baby and a backpack full of shattered dreams. That night I huddled behind a dumpster near a closed grocery store, shielding Nova with my body. I told her stories through chattering teeth, made up names for the stars hidden behind the clouds, and promised her we'd make it. I didn't believe it then. The next day, I searched for a shelter. Most were full. The ones with space had waiting lists. Eventually, a kind old nun at a women's shelter let me stay for one night. That one night became 3. Then 7. But they could only help so long. I needed income. I walked miles pushing Nova in a thrift store stroller, applying at diners, gas stations, even a janitorial supply store. Nobody wanted a young mother with no references and a baby on her hip. Eventually, a rundown motel on the edge of the city offered me a job cleaning rooms. The manager, Mr. Langley, didn't smile much, but he didn't ask many questions either. He gave me a mop, a list of rules, and let me stay in the storage room behind the laundry machines. It smelled like bleach and mildew. I made a bed out of old towels and rocked Nova to sleep on a stack of utility blankets. I cried most nights, silently, so she wouldn't hear. But in that bleak, broken place, something inside me stirred. It wasn't hope. It was defiance. I looked around and said, "This will not be my story's ending." I cleaned rooms with relentless precision, memorizing each guest's preferences. I offered to fold laundry, wash linens, even repaint baseboards. When Nova got older and could sit quietly for hours, I started reading books I found in the lost and found bin, business magazines, old college textbooks, self-help guides. That's when I first read about a man named Marcus Devereaux, a self-made millionaire who grew up in foster care, started a moving company with one used truck, and turned it into a logistics empire. His quote stuck with me. "Rock bottom is the only place where you can build with no fear of falling." It lit something in me. I started looking around differently. I didn't just mop floors. I studied traffic patterns in the motel, watched how vendors delivered supplies, listened to guests talk on their phones about deals and startups. I learned. 3 years passed. I saved every spare dollar in a tin lunchbox under the sink. I bartered babysitting with other workers. I even learned how to code from a free online course offered by a local library program. I didn't tell anyone. I just built myself in the dark. Then one night, a sleek black town car pulled into the parking lot. A tall man in an expensive coat stepped out, clearly out of place. He checked in using a false name, common enough for wealthy travelers who didn't want to be recognized. But when I brought fresh towels to his room, he looked at me. Really looked. "Thank you," he said, handing me a crisp 20. I nodded politely, but as I turned to leave, he paused. "You don't belong here," he said. "You've got more fire in your eyes than everyone in this place combined." I blinked, stunned. It was the first compliment I'd received in years that didn't come from a pitying social worker or a well-meaning nun. "People have said that before," I muttered. He smiled. "And did you believe them?" I shrugged. Didn't matter. Belief doesn't buy diapers. He chuckled, but it was a sad kind of laugh. What would you do if diapers weren't the problem? I didn't know what to say. That night, I left a note under his door. It read, "If I had the chance, I'd build a childcare service that trained single mothers in tech skills while providing on-site learning for their kids. No more choosing between feeding your baby and your future." I didn't expect a response, but the next morning, the man was waiting in the hallway. He had a leather notebook in one hand and his jacket in the other. Without a word, he took off the jacket and wrapped it around Nova, who had been sniffling from the cold. He knelt and looked up at me. "Let's build it." I didn't sleep the night after he said it. "Let's build it." His voice kept playing in my head like a melody I didn't believe was real. His name was Julian Vaughn. He wasn't just some traveling executive. He was the Julian Vaughn, a venture capitalist known for turning small ideas into billion-dollar empires. I'd seen his face on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine once. He didn't look the same in person. Tired eyes, lines deeper than his age suggested, and a humility I hadn't expected from someone of his status. We met the next morning in the motel's break room, me still wearing my cleaning uniform, Nova playing with a crumpled juice box on the floor. He opened his laptop and slid it toward me. "Show me what you've been working on," he said. I hesitated. "Working on?" "You've been planning this idea for a while. I can see it in your eyes." "So, show me." I pulled out an old notebook. Its pages yellowed and dog-eared. Inside were scribbled flowcharts, budget breakdowns, mock app interfaces I'd drawn with a ruler and blue pen. I told him about Code Nest, a hybrid tech education and childcare model for low-income single mothers. I had nothing fancy, just raw grit and a dream. He listened intently, never interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "It's rough, but brilliant. It's not just a startup. It's a revolution waiting for legs." Then he gave me two things that changed my life: a small, unsecured loan of $25,000 to build a working prototype and cover 3 months of living expenses. A promise: "You'll do the work. I'll open the doors. But the climb? That's all you." For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me not as a broken woman, but as a builder. I quit the motel job the next day and rented a tiny room above a laundromat. Julian connected me to his former assistant, a kind-hearted developer named Priya, who agreed to mentor me remotely. She taught me to refine my code, structure user flows, and create MVPs, minimum viable products. I worked 18-hour days, slept beside Nova's crib with code still swimming behind my eyelids, and learned how to pitch without stumbling. Every no made me sharper. Every setback forced me to innovate. I launched CodeNest Beta in just under 4 months. 1 classroom, 5 mothers, 3 iPads, and a volunteer instructor I'd met through a Facebook parenting group. We offered free childcare while teaching, basic web design and app development. The results were almost immediate. One mom landed a remote gig within 3 weeks. Another built a website for a local florist and earned her first paycheck. The moms called me coach. I told them I wasn't their coach. I was their mirror. But success brings scrutiny. The city's child care board questioned our licenses. A local news anchor twisted our story, calling it naive parenting masked as tech charity. Some parents pulled out, afraid of social services. I broke down that night. Sat on the bathroom floor with Nova asleep in the next room, sobbing into a towel. I felt the weight of every woman I'd promised hope to, the pressure of building something I was terrified to lose. Julian called me at midnight. I didn't tell him what was wrong. He just listened to my silence for a full minute and then said something I'll never forget. "Maya, if you want to change the world, you'll have to upset it first." His words stitched my spine back together. I reached out to local lawyers, used free legal clinics to understand compliance. I restructured our nonprofit status and applied for educational certification. I made every mom sign waivers, did background checks, and built a safety protocol so tight even the state auditors nodded in approval. Soon, we weren't just legitimate, we were untouchable. Julian introduced me to a branding expert who helped us reimagine the visual identity of CodeNest. We launched a crowdfunding campaign with a video I shot on my phone and edited using free software. It went viral. Women from all over the country messaged me, saying things like, "I thought I was the only one," and "You're building the thing I needed 5 years ago." Within a year, CodeNest expanded to 3 cities. We secured $400,000 in seed funding. We hired full-time developers and licensed caretakers. Every single mother we trained was placed in a paid internship within 60 days. Some built apps. Some became freelancers. One launched her own business before graduating from our program. Still, I never forgot where I came from. I made it a rule. Every city we opened in, I visited the shelters first. I looked for the woman hunched in the back of the room, holding a baby with one arm and her broken heart in the other. I told them, "I was you, and now I want to fight for you." But I was still fighting too. On our 2nd anniversary, a national tech journal ran a feature on disruptors of tomorrow and listed me among them. They called me the Grit Founder. It made me smile. Not because I wanted fame, but because they finally saw the same thing Julian did. Potential. Speaking of Julian, our relationship evolved too. He was never just an investor. He became a mentor, then a friend. He shared stories of how he once slept in his car to avoid the humiliation of bankruptcy. He told me about his mother, a waitress who died working double shifts to pay rent. That's why he chose me. I reminded him of her, relentless, proud, and raw with purpose. I asked him once why he never married. He said, "I never found someone who believed in their dream more than their fear." It wasn't romantic, but it was real. The more I succeeded, the more people asked how I did it. I always told the truth. I did it with cracked hands, tired eyes, and a baby strapped to my back. I did it because I had no backup plan. I did it because no one was coming, and then someone did. I think about that moment sometimes. That motel hallway. Julian taking off his coat and wrapping it around Nova. That wasn't charity. That was belief. And belief is the greatest fuel on earth. The baby who once cried behind a dumpster now giggles in classrooms filled with women learning how to code their way into independence. And every time I see them, I remember that it wasn't just a dream, it was a blueprint. I used to think survival was the goal, but once you've survived, you start to see that thriving, truly thriving, means using your voice to build bridges where you once saw only walls. By year 4, CodeNest had expanded into 7 cities. We were helping hundreds of women, single mothers, survivors, refugees, rewrite their futures with skills society said they were too broken to learn. Every new city brought a new battlefield, but I was armed now, with knowledge, with purpose, with a team of warriors who had once sat exactly where I had, forgotten, dismissed, underestimated. We were unstoppable. Or so I thought. It was in Atlanta that the storm hit. Her name was Shelby. She was one of our earliest hires, sharp, charismatic, and passionate about the mission. I'd taken her under my wing, personally mentored her, even gave her equity. I wanted Codenest to be run by women who understood the struggle. And Shelby? She understood it. Or so I believed. It started small. Inconsistent reports. Missed budget. Meetings. Then came a message from one of our donors, asking why they'd been pitched by Shelby Ventures, offering a near-identical program to Codenest, without my knowledge. My hands trembled as I read the pitch deck. It was our curriculum, our branding, our philosophy, all copied, repackaged, and sold as her own. I confronted her, hoping for remorse. She didn't flinch. "It's business, Maya," she said, calm as a mirror. "You built something great, but it's bigger than you now. People want leadership with polish, with pedigree." It stung deeper than anything Dominic had ever done, because this betrayal wore the face of someone I trusted. For 2 days, I couldn't get out of bed. Nova, now 5, crawled in next to me and whispered, "Mommy, do you still help people?" I didn't answer. She kissed my cheek. "Then don't let someone stop you." Her words sliced through the fog. I remembered who I was. I called an emergency meeting with our core team. No lawyers, no PR managers. Just us. Mothers, builders, believers. I laid it out raw. Shelby had taken our framework. We had 2 options: fight her legally and let the world watch us splinter, or outbuild her. Again. Unanimously, they voted for the latter. We scrapped our expansion plans and refocused inward. We doubled down on quality, implemented proprietary digital tools, and partnered with companies to offer guaranteed job placements for our graduates. We also launched a podcast, Code and Courage, where we told the real stories behind our success. No filters, just fire. And then came the keynote. I'd been invited to speak at the Global Women in Tech Summit in San Francisco. I almost declined. The imposter syndrome crept in. What was I doing speaking to CEOs and PhDs? Julian called me the night before. "Why are you hesitating?" he asked. "I'm not like them." He paused. "Exactly. That's why they need to hear you." I stood on stage the next day in a second-hand blazer, my palms sweating behind the podium. And I told my story, not the press-polished version, but the whole truth. I talked about shelters and scrubbing toilets, about failing fast and rising faster. I spoke about betrayal and belief, about Nova's whisper and Julian's jacket. I said, "You don't need a trust fund to fund trust. You don't need permission to lead. You just need pain, turned into purpose, and the will to walk through fire without asking if it's fair." The room erupted. Not just applause, tears. Women lined up for hours afterward to hug me, to share their own hidden truths. And suddenly, I saw it. The movement was no longer mine. It was theirs, ours. A global uprising of mothers, dreamers, and fighters who refused to let their circumstances dictate their ceilings. The success snowballed. A major tech company offered a $2.5 million grant to expand Codenest globally. We opened programs in South Africa, India, Brazil. We created a multilingual platform so single mothers in remote areas could access our curriculum from their phones. And then came a letter. It arrived in a gold-trimmed envelope, addressed to me in perfect cursive. It was from the governor. I had been nominated for the State Medal of Innovation. I reread the letter 3 times, then sat in silence. I thought of every night I'd fallen asleep hungry, every tear I'd wiped from Nova's cheeks, every time I told myself I was too broken to lead, and now they wanted to put my name in history books? No. I didn't build Codenest to be remembered. I built it so others could be seen. I accepted the award not for pride, but for visibility, because when a single mother walks into a classroom or a boardroom and sees a face like mine on the wall, she'll know it's possible. That night, at TU, the gala, Julian sat next to me in a classic black tux, looking proud but quiet. After the ceremony, we stepped onto the balcony. The city shimmered beneath us, I turned to him and said, "You changed my life." He shook his head. "You changed your life." I just held the door. I asked him why he'd done it, taken a chance on a stranger with nothing. He looked out over the skyline, then back at me, because years ago someone did the same for me. An old mentor. He gave me a second-hand laptop and said, "Don't waste this life." I did well, but I've always felt that my real return on investment would come when someone like you passed that torch forward. And I would. I already was. Because the real legacy of CodeNest wasn't just the women we trained. It was the children they raised in new realities. Kids who'd grow up watching their mothers build apps, lead teams, and rewrite history. Nova, now fluent in HTML before she could even spell kindergarten, often sat beside me asking when she could run her own class. Soon, I told her. Very soon. The day I stood in front of the United Nations to address the Global Education and Innovation Summit, I wore the same shoes I had when I scrubbed motel floors. Not because I couldn't afford new ones, but because I needed to remember. I needed to remember the girl who once sat on a concrete sidewalk clutching a baby in a trash bag. The girl who thought her life was over when her husband slammed that door for the last time. Now, as applause echoed across the chamber, as Nova sat in the front row beaming with pride, I closed my eyes and took a single breath. Because this wasn't just my story anymore. This was a movement. It had been 10 years since Julian took off his coat in that hallway. 10 years since I'd coded my first app in a laundromat with Nova asleep beside me. 10 years since the world underestimated a broken single mother. A lot had changed. CodeNest now operated in 21 countries. We had trained over 50,000 women. Our graduates were building startups, leading product teams, running for office. We weren't just creating coders. We were creating economic engines in places no one believed in. And every time a woman emailed me to say, "You gave me my life back," I replied the same thing. "No, sister, you took it back." Julian and I remained close. After a decade of fighting in the trenches together, we'd become more than just friends. He never pushed for anything romantic, but there was always something unspoken, a current beneath the calm. On my 38th birthday, he gave me a small box with a note. "This isn't a proposal. It's a question." Inside was a vintage compass. The note continued. "You've always been your own North Star. But if you ever want someone to walk beside you, not in front, not behind, but beside, I'm here." I cried. Not because I needed a man, but because I finally had someone who understood that I was never looking to be saved, only seen. I married Julian the following year. It was a small ceremony in Nairobi, where we'd just launched a flagship CodeNest campus. Nova walked me down the aisle. She was 11, stunning in a silk dress she picked herself. Halfway through the vows, she whispered to me, "Mom, you did it." No, we did it. That night, while the team danced under the stars, I stood with Julian, watching the girls from our program laugh and take selfies. These weren't the faces of trauma. These were the faces of transformation. He turned to me and said, "You're not just teaching them to code. You're teaching them to reconstruct their lives, line by line. But impact comes with responsibility." That same year, a natural disaster devastated a rural village in Honduras where we had just opened a learning center. I flew in with our emergency team, heartbroken to see our school flattened, computers soaked in mud, families displaced. One of our students, Mariana, had lost her home. But when I found her, she wasn't crying. She was handing out donated laptops, organizing a pop-up classroom under a tarp. When I asked her how she had the strength, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Because you showed me that I'm not a victim. I'm a vessel." That moment solidified something deep inside me. This wasn't just about education or tech. This was about legacy. A few months later, I was invited to Harvard to teach a short course called Building Empires from Rock Bottom. I walked into that lecture hall, once reserved for the pedigreed elite, with my story stitched into every cell of my being. The students were curious, eager, polished. But I saw confusion in their eyes when I told them the truth. I didn't climb here. I bled here. I didn't read about strategy. I lived it. Every sleepless night. Every eviction notice. Every bottle of formula I couldn't afford. I paused and added, the difference between me and the people you read about. In business journals, they started with capital. I started with chaos, and chaos is the best teacher you'll ever have, if you listen. The day Nova graduated high school, she wore a hoodie that said, "Built by a builder." She had started her own coding boot camp for teens in underserved areas. When I asked if she planned to take over Code Nest someday, she shook her head. No. Mom, I'm going to build my own thing. Bigger. Better. I smiled. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. She grinned. You're still going to help me fund it though, right? We laughed until we cried. When people ask me today what I'm proudest of, they expect me to say the awards, the campuses, the viral TED Talk. But my answer never changes. I'm proud I didn't give up on myself. Not when the world called me trash. Not when men tried to break me. Not when fear told me I was unworthy. Because the truth is, the world never gives crowns to women like me. We forge them, in fire, in silence, in exile. And then we wear them not for vanity, but for visibility. To show every girl on the floor of a shelter that she is not disposable. She is a dynasty in the making. Julian passed away unexpectedly 5 years later. Heart attack. Peaceful. He was 70. Spoke at his funeral. I told the story of the motel hallway, the coat, the baby, the man who believed in someone the world discarded. He didn't save me, I said, voice trembling. He saw me, and because he did, thousands now see themselves. I buried him with that same compass he once gave me, and in return, he left me everything, his equity, his funds, his foundation. But more than that, he left me permission to continue what we started. Now, when I stand at the edge of a stage and look at thousands of women cheering, not for me, but for themselves, I know. This is what rising looks like. Not clean, not linear, not perfect, but powerful, because a woman who rebuilds herself from ashes doesn't just rise, she reigns.